very first trout I caught was on a dew worm suspended under a 2-inch red and white plastic bobber on Deer Lake in Burnaby. And that fish, even though by that age, I was probably 8 or 9, I know I'd caught hundreds of salmon on live herring or herring strip. But watching that bobber go down was, which it just fascinated me, and it continues to fascinate me. A lot of people ask me, what do you dream about just before you fall asleep every night? It's a bobber going down. Well, it's early in the morning. We just got out on the water, so we're hoping there's going to be some. It's spring, so we're hoping there's going to be some chironomid hatches later on in the day. But right now, I'm just trying some searching patterns, like dragonfly nymphs, leeches, things like that. Maybe hang a blob, and I'm just watching the surface to see for fish moving. Seeing when the swallows start to show up. I've seen a couple of them come out already. So they're already sending scouts out to check out to see whether the chironomids are starting to emerge. It's like there's a swallow right there that's come out. The birds tell us when there's a hatch going on, and even though we're on a small lake, there could be chironomids or mayflies coming off in this area, but not at the other end, or vice versa. So you look in the water, on the water, and you look up in the air to see what's going on. We got to use our electronics, depth sounder, to mark, see if we can find concentrations of fish. But it's early, and so we just have to, try different patterns, different techniques. Like I put on the Type 7 right now, and I'm going to try stripping dragonfly nymph. The goal is we need to catch a fish that's big enough that we could do a throat pump on. And that'll help us get dialed into what's coming off and what they're eating, if they're eating anything right now. I'm marking a few fish on the side scan on one of the sounders, so I know there's fish in the area. And when the reason why I anchored right here is I saw a fish on the down sounder right under the boat. I saw 3 or 4 fish, and that's enough for me to know that there's a few fish in the area. And now our job is to try to figure out if we can get them to bite. That's the big thing. When we're out searching for trying to get that first fish of the day, I'm changing flies. I'll make half a dozen casts, maybe 10 casts, and retrieves, and then I'm going to switch. Because we just need to. Don't know what they're doing right now. I know there's fish in the area, and it's just you got to go through a sequence of patterns that could be effective at that time of year. It's a little deer hair, spun clip deer hair dragonfly nymph. It's a good searching pattern. Fast strip through the water with a Type 7 line, which I've got on here. If you're fishing a new lake, you've never been to it, and you might not know what insects or food sources are most common, then it pays to take a few minutes to turn some rocks over, turn some logs over, see what color the shrimp are, how big they are, whether there's dragonflies, damselflies. You'll see some leeches, see what color they are. You gotta remember that trout aren't colorblind, so all those little things that I call it, being observant, help put the pieces of the puzzle together, so that you're going to catch some fish that day. So, again, it's about looking in the water, on the water, what the wildlife birds are doing, and then, you know, you can go ashore. Like if we went ashore right now and turned up some weeds, we would get lots of juvenile damsel nymphs and mayfly nymphs, and we get some scuds of shrimp, and there'll be some leeches in there as well. And sooner or later, you know, hopefully we're going to see the chironomids coming up, and then we'll know we're in the area for potentially some good chironomid fishing. Yeah, there's the chironomids.
Cool.
See, lots of Daphne in there.
Yeah, it's the really small stuff.
Those
right?
small stuff, zooplankton. And then there's chironomids in there. So, well, so throat pump can tell you what they're eating. I work with Phil Rowley, and we do a lot of courses together. Phil and I also have an e-store that we sell our fly patterns that we've designed on it, as well as our books and DVDs, and then we offer online courses and that we teach during the winter time on different fly fishing tactics in lakes, and then we do in person. We're back to doing it in person 1 week stillwater fly fishing courses. You know, we're currently doing them now at Corbett Lake Lodge on Corbett Lake. It's a great venue for teaching and a great place to stay, and so they're kind of fun as well. Yeah, there's not much happening. I've had a couple plucks, just light plucks on the dragonfly nymph, but fish aren't really going here. So, you know, if they're not going, it's early in the morning, then you need to pull anchors and have a trip, drive around, have a look at your sounder, see if we can mark a few more fish, or potentially see some fish moving. Like, I haven't seen a fish move yet, jumping, splashing, nothing, rising. So we need to look around. It could be happening somewhere else, and now's the time to do it. When the fishing's, if it's nothing happening here for, you know, like you said, we've been here 30 minutes, nothing's happening, so it's time to pull up anchors and have a look around and see if we can find something a little more interesting. Every day's different. 2 days ago it was crazy fishing out here. One of the most effective ways to fish lakes, especially in productive interior lakes, is with chironomids, because it is the most abundant and sustained hatch of any insects in lakes. So the fish are feeding on these guys, the chironomid larvae, pupa, and sometimes the adults, right from almost a few days after the ice is off a lake, all through the spring and then into the summer months. And then on some lakes you get late summer hatches and mid-fall hatches. The most common way to fish them is with floating lines and strike indicators. Chironomids are the biggest. They're the longest, most abundant, prolonged hatch you're going to find in lakes, and it's a spring to early summer hatch primarily, so it's prime time right now. The water temperatures are in the low 50s Fahrenheit, about 11 degrees, 12 degrees centigrade, and it's prime. That's the prime window for chironomids to be coming off. So that's what everybody out here today is looking for, or is hoping for, that the chironomids come off, and they have been coming off fairly consistently, but some days they don't come off as heavy as others, but that's why they call it fishing. So. I'll net them. Another nice fish. Man, he's got a few chironomids in him.
Yeah.
I'm going to slide them over.
Yep. Wonderful.
We're fishing floating lines indicator, so I've got this is a scientific angler's amplitude indicator fly line, so it's a little heavier up front, so it's easier to turn a fly over and your indicator. And then I've got a 12-foot indicator leader on, so it's only got, the unique thing about these indicator leaders, it's only got 3 feet of thick butt section, and it tapers down to level, in this case 3x or 8 pound, all the way down. And then you just add more tippet, thin diameter tippet, to make sure you can fish the depth you want to be fishing. And the reason why you want all thin leader in the water is that it hangs. You want to be hanging vertically, straight up and down. So if you were to use a 15-foot typical tapered leader, then about 8 feet of that leader is heavy butt section, thick, and so it's not going to hang straight up and down. And so you want straight, because then you know you're hanging at that depth that you think you're hanging at. And so that's set up, and then I'm just putting on a quick release indicator onto my I've lengthened out my leader a bit because we're in deeper water, and we got to use these quick release indicators when we're fishing basically more than 12 feet of water, because a fixed indicator, when you can't get the fish close enough to the landing net with the fixed indicator. So with these ones, they trip, they release. You just set the indicator little snug little loop there, and then when you catch the fish, when you get tension on it, it slides down, and so you can land the fish. So at the end of my leader, now that I've added on a bit more tippet, then I'm just going to put a little barrel swivel on, like a 12 or a 14, just add a bit of weight, keep the fly down, and it also helps slow the bounce down when you get a bit of a chop on the water. So then I've got my swivel, and then I'm going to change this tippet, but from the swivel I'm going to add a more fluorocarbon tippet to about 18 to 24 inches till we get down to our fly. And so I'm just using I like to use fluorocarbon from the swivel down to my fly. So this is 4x 7 pound, 7.1 pound, and I'm going to add about 24 inches to that, maybe a bit more. And the reason fluorocarbon is you want to be using it is it's finer diameter than monofilament, and when you buy quality fluorocarbon, and it's stronger and it's less visible than monofilament, and so it's all about trying to keep things less visible to the trout. And then we just put on clinch knots or improved clinch knots to either end of the swivel. We got 24 to 36 inches of tippet material, and then I'm setting this rod up to fish chironomids, because we're starting to see a few chironomids on the water here. I don't know if they're on them yet, but see, I've got one of my boxes of chironomids. They're pretty small that are coming off right now, so I'm probably going to put one of these little guys on, and hopefully we can catch a fish. But at least I'm seeing fish now on the side scan on my one sounder, so I know there's fish out in front of us. And again, we got to try to figure out what they're eating, if they're eating. But at least we're seeing fish now on the sounder, and I've seen some shucks, some chironomid shucks drift by, and we've seen a couple adult chironomids as well. So hopefully things are looking up. The reason why we can use floating lines and indicators is that the pupa suspend at the bottom of the lake, and then they don't swim around. They just sit head up, tail down, and then when they're ready to fully develop their, they make a pupil ascent vertically to the surface of the lake. And so when you're fishing, basically 20 feet of water or less, you can get away with a floating line and an indicator, suspending that fly within a foot of the bottom of the lake. That's probably the most consistent depth to start with, and then if you're not getting them at that depth, you can slowly or gradually move up higher in the water column. But by far the majority of the pupae are eaten by the trout within a couple feet of the lake bottom, regardless of the depth. You can have chironomids coming off in 5 feet of water, in 55 feet of water, and they could be in 90 feet of water. So when we get into deep water beyond 20, 25 feet, all the way up, to 60, 70 and beyond, that's when we switch to full sinking lines and let the sinking line do get the fly down to the bottom, and then you can do a nice gradual angle retrieve up through the water column, or in deep water like 25, 30, 35 feet of water, you can do it's called dangling, and that's using it's a vertical presentation using the fastest sinking line you've got, like a type 7 full sinker, and then allow that sinking line to hang straight up and down over the side of the boat. Again, short leader, maybe a 4-foot leader, with your chironomid pupa a foot off the bottom. And so deep lining or dangling is really effective when we get into deeper water, just physically too deep to fish with a strike indicator. So because it's such a prolonged hatch, we spend a lot of time fishing with indicators, or you can fish floating lines and long leaders, no indicator. We call that naked fishing, and that can be very effective as well. The bottom line is that all these presentations with the chironomids, you want to start your presentation very close to the lake bottom, because that's where the majority are fed on. There'll be days when the fish want to eat them higher in the water column, but by and large, you always want to start close to the bottom and then work your way up if you're not getting them right on the bottom. There's basic structure to lakes, and if you flew today with a drone and looked down on the lake, you would see you would see the shoal, shallow area where you can see the bottom, and then you see the drop off where the shallow water drops off in the deep water zone of the lake. So there's basically 3 parts to the lake in terms of habitat structure. The shoal, which extends from the edge of the lake out to where we get the drop off, where we drop off into deep water, and then the mid-water or deep water zone lake, which could be 30 feet deep, it could be 70 feet deep, and the fish, typically the majority of food that trout like to feed on are found on the drop-off into the shallower water. So that's why we spend so much time in basically 25 feet of water or less. But the deep water zone of the lake becomes important when you see those hatches of chironomids coming off in really deep water. So if you're not fishing a clear lake, you can't see the shoals and the drop off in the deep water zone, and that's why you focus on a depth sounder. It tells you where you are in the water column and where the shoal ends, where the drop off starts, and where the deep water begins as well. So in the spring months, water temperatures are cool. And the relative water temperature does affect the activity levels of the trout. So when the ice first comes off a lake, it's in Fahrenheit, it's 40, 42, 43 degrees. It's pretty cool. And water needs, the fish aren't that active yet. They're prime for trout. Prime water temperatures for feeding activity and just overall metabolism, so it gets them swimming around a lot. Is once we get above about 46 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to the mid 60s Fahrenheit, those are prime water temperatures, not only for fish activity levels, but also for insect hatches. Once we get above 70 Fahrenheit, that becomes an issue. Mortality potentially from handling fish, from playing a fish a long time and then trying to release them alive. So, anything above 70, you really have to be careful when you're fishing. If you're going to fish, early mornings and or in the evenings, or just, give the fish a break. You can see on streams now in different states and provinces, because our summers are getting warmer, you're seeing restrictions on when you can fish during the day, early morning periods or evenings, and avoiding the mid-afternoon period where water temperatures are that high or high enough that catch and release mortality could be a significant issue. Fish may swim away and look fine, but that long fight in that warm water builds up lactic acid, and the fish have a hard time recovering from that and could die. So got to be careful about those warm water temperatures. And the neat thing about lake fishing today, for example, was a pretty challenging day on the water. But we persisted and finally got a few fish on Chironomids just to prove we could do it. But that's what keeps every day's different on the water. Tomorrow could be a totally different day out here, because I know the last 2 days on this lake, the Chironomid fishing was stellar. I mean, I was here, and then it just decided to get very picky. The hatch is very localized today, and it could be because there's a bit of a weather change, but that's why we call it fishing, and that's why we keep coming back day after day to see if we can figure them out. You've got so many hours in the day to figure out these fish, and some days you figure it out and you have a great day in the water, other days not so great, and that's what gives you the impetus to come back a little bit harder the next time out on the water.